So this morning what I wanted to do was a huge review of everything so far. So quick review, like because we already know it really well, I'm just going to do a quick review of terminal commands, quick review of GitHub. We're going to go over arrays and hashes in both languages, loops, if-else statement, all the basic stuff that you did in Codecademy for the first 3 hours, and you're like, I changed one little line, and then now all of a sudden this code works. I don't understand. So we'll do that. We have 8 challenges to get through today. And today is a pairing optional day. If you want to pair, please do. If you want to work by yourself, you can do that as well. All right, so first things first. Yes, Sean?
I just wanted to say this like as a general thing because it's going to lead right into what you're doing. It seems to me that like one should care more about understanding how you're making it work than just getting it done, and then how the fuck do I do that?
Yeah.
That's all.
Sure. The comment was you should care more about how it's done rather than getting it done. Yeah, there's definitely a fine line, and I'll just say this like before we get started with this. There's a lot. On the first day, I noticed people were kind of like, oh, there's not a ton of challenges. And then Tuesday, Wednesday got a little more intense. And then today, you have 8 challenges. So there are a lot of challenges in the first 3 weeks on purpose just to get everybody caught up, make sure that there's no issues with getting to understand the language. Get all of it done as fast as possible, but not at the expense of, I don't understand a single thing that I did. You know, if you can only finish 4 or 5 things today rather than 8, but you understand those 4 and 5 things, it's a better place for you to be than saying, let me just copy somebody else's code. All right, at least I got credit in my mind, you know, don't be like that. Second, you'll start to see pretty soon, especially this week and next week, you have not worked out in your lives yet how to manage the amount of stuff that's coming into your brain and the hours that you spend here. Remember to do, like if you work out every single day, continue to go work out, maybe before or after the class is over. Make sure you're getting time to go eat and like spend time with people and things of that nature, because you can burn out very quickly in like learning this amount of material so fast. So if you need anything from us, let us know. We're here for you. At the same time, we expect a lot out of you because you're going to represent us later down the road. That's really what it comes down to. The curriculum calendar. So we did a bunch of different topics for the past few days, and you can kind of see, I'm just going to do a review more or less for everything up to this point. So I'm going to start just to give myself some semblance of an idea of where to start. I'm going to start with just basic command line stuff. So the command line is basically iTerm. It's the way that we've been talking to our computer so far. And again, we're not going to be double clicking and dragging things around anymore because real developers generally don't do that. And because when you connect to a computer, like for most businesses today do not house their own data servers. Like they don't, like if you think that Chase.com inside of that giant tower has an entire data room full of their own stuff. Oh, it's possible. That's a bad example. That's actually entirely possible. Let me think of a company that's hosted on Amazon. I'm just going to go with Groupon because I know it's partially hosted on Amazon. So Groupon, because like the building is fairly large, they don't have all the room. But like Groupon is a multi-million-dollar company. They don't have all the room in the world to pay for people to maintain all of the computers that they would need for other folks to hit their particular website. They may not have the resources to care about like the electricity and the air conditioning to cool down all the machines. So what they do is they rent like computer space from other people. They rent computer space most likely from Amazon. Now, these computers may not be here in Chicago where they can walk in and like plug in a keyboard and things like that. They may live in Pennsylvania. It could be in the mountains somewhere in Denver area. Like we don't know where those particular computers are. We just know that they're up all the time. Because they can't just like plug in a keyboard and mouse and click around, they have to use the command line oftentimes. So the way that they communicate with their computer and the way that we communicate with our computer is through the command line rather than double clicking everywhere. So we've been learning the basics of the command line. And again, on the left-hand side, this is what we've been doing so far. On the right-hand side, we just type things and then it does exactly the same thing. I've seen most people using the command line fairly well. Again, we're just doing basic things right now, but it seems like people are taking to it quite well. There's many things you can do with the command line: adding folders, removing folders, adding and removing files, listing things, moving things. And those are just like the very basic things that I want you to know now, just to get things going. And everyone has this, but I'm going to just ask a few questions. How do I delete a file?
RM.
Yep, there's that RM right over here. If I wanted to create a file, what would it be? Touch. What if I wanted to delete a folder that's empty?
RMDIR.
Yep, I can just do RMDIR, because if I have an empty folder, I don't have to delete the things inside of that folder. I can just delete the folder because it's empty. If I have stuff inside of a folder and I want to delete it, how do I do that? Yep, that I had to add this -RF flag at the very end. The -RF stands for what? What's that?
Remove folder.
Could be. I'm not actually sure. I've heard it's recursively forced. I mean, this is a quick Google search, but basically what RM-RF does is it deletes everything until there's nothing left to delete, and then it deletes the folder. So I think there's recursively somewhere inside of that. It's a quick Google search, but I'm not exactly sure. I feel pretty comfortable with terminal commands so far. I feel like most people are able to, clone things and CD into different directories correctly. But one thing I will point out that I have noticed is, let's say that I wanted to clone down Roman numerals. I have seen quite a few people, let's say I'm on my desktop and do git clone Roman numerals, and then not be able to find Roman numerals. So when you clone something down, all you're doing is just downloading it onto your, down to that particular folder. You have to actually go from where you currently are into that cloned repository in order to actually access the code. So if I'm just going to do subl here, I'm like, where the heck is my Roman numerals? Like, I thought I opened the Roman numerals. It's actually located right over here. So before you do that, once you clone something down, make sure that you're changing your directory CD into that Roman numerals and then opening up Sublime. Then you'll just get everything with Roman numerals. I'm not sure what's going on here. Whatever. Okay, I feel pretty good about that. And then we talked about GitHub a couple days ago, and we're talking about it today. And how many people for the first day just went way over your head? I'm seeing a few nods and things like that. So GitHub is just an online company. It's just a company that hosts Git repos. Git and GitHub are not the same thing. Git is just version control software. So think about like Google Docs or Google Sheets saving different instances of your, or think about it like this. When I was a kid, I had a wall inside of my room that my mom would put a ruler on top of my head and then just kind of like mark a little thing with the date of like, this is how tall you were on this particular day. So it's kind of like, I can never go back to that time, but it's like keeping track of different versions of myself. I can see at any given point on this particular date, that's how tall I was. With software, it's saving different versions of things. So let's say that today, James writes some code to fix the login page, and he breaks everything. Let's say it's his first day on the job, he breaks everything by accident. Luckily, because of Git, there's an old saved version that they can nuke what he wrote that broke everything and go back to that old thing so that they're not losing everything. In a very real life scenario, this is why you should always never merge your code directly into master, John. So you should never merge your code directly into master because you want someone else to vouch for you. When I was a junior, I was working at Groupon. I wrote a bit of code by accident that I pushed to master by accident. And I thought, oh, I think it's fine. It's totally okay. And then one of the directors of engineering walks over to my row and goes, "Who is Jay Young?" I was like, "That's me, sir." And he goes, "You just brought down the orders database for the past 30 minutes, and we're out like $300,000. And I was like, holy crap, like this is the day that I get fired. I was there for like 2 weeks. They're like, this is the day that I get fired. This is the day that I get sued. And at that particular point, like one of my managers steps up and he goes, don't worry about it. Like he pushed master by accident and he's a junior. And he's like, oh, okay. All right, that's fine. Don't worry about it then. But had that person not stepped up for me, stepped up for me, I might have gotten fired that day. And all my boss had to do was just go onto GitHub, find my commit, find the previous commit, and just roll everything back to the previous version. That's the power of having things that are, you save versions of different things. And then he said, next time, make sure you get a pull request. Make sure one of us signs off on it, because inevitably you'll write something that breaks, and if it goes through 4 or 5 people and goes through the process and still breaks, you're totally safe. That happened at my next job. I was working at a company called One Main Financial, which does kind of subprime lending, but they have 1,000+ branches. And I accidentally mixed up the latitude and the longitude. I had them flipped around. So all of a sudden, my boss walks over and he goes, John, why do we have branches in Antarctica? I was like, I'm not sure. And then we looked through the code. I had gotten a thumbs up from my boss, his boss, and the QA team. No one had picked up that was an issue. So he's just like, oh, haha, you mixed up the Latin long. It's fine, just fix it. Because I had 4 other people go through it, it's safe. You never want to push to master, but in case that you do, I had to fix this yesterday with Roman numerals, because I'm saving different versions, I can always roll back to a different version. So again, Git is just that version control software, and GitHub is where those Git records are stored. It's just a company. GitHub is just a company. So there's Bitbucket, GitLab. I don't know anymore. Those 2 are the big ones.
There's a nuance when you say push to master. Obviously, you can try to push to master for an app, right? But generally, you're going to push not to master and request, pull request anyway, and someone's going to sort through that, right? That's pretty much the protocol.
Sure. So the question was you can push to master at any time, but generally speaking, you open a pull request. If I push directly to master, I don't need a pull request.
Yeah.
So it's the concept of the master branch is kind of like a giant timeline. If you have 15 people working on any bit of code, you have one branch that's the source of truth. That should be that's what goes into production. That's what everyone pulls from. So if you push directly to master, you're basically saying, I want to update the production code and everyone else's code because my changes are good enough that I don't need a review. And most of the time, 99% of the time, you will need someone to review your code.
It just seems like there would be some sort of permissions or something that wouldn't allow you to push to master. Am I wrong on that?
There are different permissions. It depends on the company that you work for. If you're a developer on a small to mid-sized team, which is most of you when you leave here, their permission, you can push directly to master. If it's a large organization or if it's open source like Ruby on Rails, you cannot push directly to master. They have permissions against that. John?
He had my
Your question. Cool.
So GitHub, there's just a setting that you change that only gives permission to certain people to push to master.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I changed those permissions yesterday. So there's a small little permission setting on GitHub for remote. If you didn't hear that, I changed that thing yesterday, and that's why you were able to push directly to master.
Was Groupon a big organization or a small organization?
So Groupon is a very large organization, but it's an organization with many different repositories. So we'll talk about this more. It's the concept of microservices. For a company like Groupon, you can have what's called a giant monolith, which is one app with 20 million lines of code, and if you change one thing, it breaks everything. That is not a place that you want to be. You want to have, imagine if you had one giant military. That's it. One branch, everyone goes inside of there. That's basically the VA. And from what I hear, it's a bad experience. But if you had what they call microservices, which is a lot of very, very small individual things, it takes away a lot of the brittleness of one giant organization, and then puts it into smaller organizations. So each smaller organization is in charge of one thing for the greater good. So there are different Git commands that we can use. So we have Git init. This is when you are starting something completely from scratch on your computer. You're not cloning anything down. Generally speaking, you won't do this. You're probably going to clone something. And the act of cloning is to download from GitHub or wherever it's hosted, onto your particular machine. So you just run git clone, which is to download this particular repo from online down to your computer. So let's say you bring everything down to your computer and you're making some sort of changes. Go ahead. All right.
And so, John, when we're cloning from a file from GitHub onto our machine, that's not the master. Rather, that's like a replication of the master, right?
Yes.
It's like a new version of the master.
Yes and no. So when I clone, sure. So the question was like, when I clone, what basically comes down to my machine?
Right.
It's a copy of the master, but you also have the ability to, because it's a Git repository and it's pointed toward, when you push, you upload, it's pointed towards the exact same location. You can actually overwrite the original. So you are copying down the original, but you can also overwrite the original.
Okay. Thank you.
So let's say you make some changes and you want to basically say, I want to add my changes and push it inside of the master branch. I want to push my code into production, or I want other people to be able to use it. You're going to add each one of those files one by one for right now, because it's a good habit to get into. Eventually you're going to be working with, right now you're working with 1 or 2 files at most. Pretty soon it'll be 4 to 5. After that it'll be 8 to 10. Then before you know it, it's like 15 files without blinking. You want to add things one by one and then commit it using git commit -m and then some sort of small message. This basically saves a snapshot of the current state of the project and then puts your stamp of approval on it. An example, if you want to just take a look at the, maybe even the curriculum, you can kind of see that I have 14 different commits for your curriculum. And I have each one of these things, I have a small little note for myself, and I can roll, and you can see these nonsensical strings like 2B884D5 or whatever this says. I can essentially say, let's say like somebody decides to push to master and nuke everything. I can actually go back, grab this commit, and restore this to everybody. And I can see exactly what I did. This is not terribly descriptive, but it just says update README, fix up video links, finish up naming of the repo. I write little notes for myself so I can go back at different times and know what I did at that particular point. To take a look at what you've been, like what files have been changed, I'm just going to run git status. It'll show either red or green. Like red is the things that you've changed, green is the things that you've added to the staging area. Staging area, imagine a box, you're sending it off to mom, you dump a bunch of stuff inside, you take a bunch of stuff out, but when you seal it and you pull that tape over, that's the act of committing at that particular point. And then finally, I'm going to push. So clone was to download, push is to upload. I'm going to do git push, origin, and then whatever the name of my branch is. Some things for you here, git init, git add commit, git push, and then there's also git pull. So the git pull we talked about, if in the case that, you know, 2 people are working on, let's say a team is working on a particular bit of code, and then the boss changes something, and they want to pull down those changes, like download those, bring those changes into their code base on their machine, all they have to do is just do git pull, origin, and then whatever the name of the branch is. Most of the time it's master. Michael.
So just to understand that, because I know you said this the other day, so git pull, so you said if like I have a file named whatever JS,
Yes.
.js, and I have A, B in there, but my boss made a change and now they have A, B, C, D, or I'm sorry, they have like F, G.
Sure.
When I pull it down, it'll erase my A, B, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's go over that question because I think it's worthwhile, and then we'll take a break and we'll get into like the programming fundamentals. So the act of, there's a, let's go to Roman numerals here. Do I still have this nonsensical text in here? All right, let's say I'm going to clone down Roman numerals, which I believe I already did. All right, so I'm going to open this up in Sublime. It's right over here, and I got my 3 windows, my Google Chrome, my text editor, and my iTerm. Let's say I'm writing some code, blah, blah, blah. I'm writing stuff over here. And then all of a sudden, my boss goes inside of the Ruby file, and this gets pushed into master. Hello, I am messing with everything. And he commits those changes. and all of a sudden the master is updated. So when I cloned it down, it didn't have that extra thing that says, hello, I'm messing with everything. But inside of master at this particular point, it's been updated and it says, hello, I am messing with everything. You can kind of see that the code that I wrote on line 1 does not conflict at all with the code that's written on line 1 over here. Because the only code I wrote was here on line 3, where it just says blah, blah, blah. So every now and then, I will want to pull my changes down. So what I'll do is I'll do git pull origin master. And then it'll basically see, take a look at the code that I have on my computer, take a look at what's on GitHub. If there's anything different, I'm going to pull those changes down. All right, as of right now, it says, you have changes that would be overwritten by the merge. So it hasn't actually pulled anything down yet. It says, please commit or stash your changes before you merge. So let's see, git status. I see that I have some broken code here, and some code that I wrote here. Let's just do git checkout -b any branch. So I'm on a different branch now. I'm going to git add this particular thing and say git commit added blah, blah, blah at the bottom. Now when I git pull origin master, it says like, are you sure you want to like basically are you sure you want to merge everything? So I'm just gonna, it's gonna pop this open. I'm gonna close it. And you can see that inside of Roman numerals, I added two things. Two things changed. There was a line added and there was a line deleted. And you can kind of see now I've also brought in, hello, I am messing with everything on this particular page. So if it doesn't conflict with what you've already written, you can pull it down very easily. You just have to make sure that your changes are committed first. Now the issue really comes into play when something is changed in master on the same line that you've changed your stuff. This is called a merge conflict. So you can see inside of master, I have lines 1 and 2, and line 3 is nothing. My line 3 says blah, blah, blah. And if I added another line inside of master, somebody goes into the code base and adds a whole bunch of garbage. Master now reflects like this. This is what master looks like. And master is agreed to be like the single point of truth. So when I try to pull from this point, and do git pull origin master one more time, I'll get something called a merge conflict. You can kind of see it right down over here. It says, sorry, you've got a merge conflict. What a merge conflict is, the code that you wrote conflicts exactly with the same line number as master inside of GitHub. So remember, I had blah, blah, blah. And inside of the online version of master, there's 1, 2, 3, and all these numbers. So this ugly looking thing is going to show up. And basically the head portion is, this is what you wrote. This is what's inside of master. Which one do you want? Fix it up yourself. So all this extra stuff is just basically to differentiate which one is your code and which one is the other person's code. This one's yours. This one's the other one. Figure out which one you would like. So I'd be like, okay, let's get rid of, I like my version of blah, blah, blah better. And then when I run git status again, it says, we're in the middle of a merge right now. And I fixed the merge, so I'm just going to do git add. And then I can git commit. Close this. And then I've pulled down everything from master. That might not make sense for about a week. Just letting you know. But I just wanted to get it out there. All right, so let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back at 10 a.m. We'll blast through some fundamentals, and then that should be it for today.